Hello and welcome to Global Questions with me, Zainab Badawi. Relations between the United States and China are at rock bottom, and central to the tensions is their rivalry on technology. Washington, for instance, has tightened restrictions on Huawei 5G technology, whilst China denies access to the likes of Google and Facebook. The battleground for global power is being fought in artificial intelligence, the telecoms and internet industries. We ask, who is winning the US-China tech war? Well, to bring you this edition of Global Questions, as always, our two panellists and our audience members join us via video link. So let me tell you who's in the hot seat this week giving the answers. Anya Manuel was a diplomat in the US State Department and is co-founder of a strategic consultancy alongside the former US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. She's spoken out about how America needs to win the technology race with China by adopting a more offensive strategy. And Shirley Yu is a political economist and was a news anchor on China's national television. She's also a fellow at Harvard University and the London School of Economics. She's the founder of China Big Idea. That's a daily strategic briefing service. And she's one of the authors of a new book called Huawei Goes Global, Made in China for the World. Welcome to you both and to my audience members, and a solitary round of applause from me. And remember, you too can join the conversation. It's hashtag BBC Global Questions. Let's go to our first question. And it's from an engineering student from Zambia who's currently studying in China, Umbasela Sanga. Your question, please.
Well, my question is the quality of the technology created in America faster than that made in China? Which technology superpowers produce better quality that is more effective?
Ooh, right. Shirley, who's got the better quality?
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Zainab, for having me. In technology, I think speed and scale matters, but more importantly, competition matters. China has become better in quality primarily because of competition. Two of the leading sectors that are characterizing China's Made in China 2025 currently are EV productions and the smartphone manufacturing. And so if you look at it, 51% of global smartphones are currently being produced in China. Huawei, in the midst of all these sanctions in 2020, smartphone market share overtook that of Samsung's to become the number one global smartphone maker. So how did it happen? On EVs, the same thing. 48% of current EVs that are running on global streets are currently in China. By 2025, 50% of global EV productions are going to come from China. And if you look at the US, Tesla is amazing, but there are not a lot of new EV players or EV makers in the US. But in China, there are hundreds, Zainab. But if you look at AI, that's another major competitive area between China and the United States. And very simply, China is going to rival up in this global AI superpower race. Very simply, if you want to become a superpower in AI, you need a lot of data. And in order to have a lot of data, you need a 5G infrastructure.
Well, Anya, Shirley has certainly laid her cards on the table there. So China wins hands down on quality, she says.
Thank you for that question. Shirley is certainly right that China has made great strides in handsets, in 5G technology, in artificial intelligence, in electric vehicles, just as she said. When I look at the technology race between China and the US, Europe, and others, I think there are 5 areas that are really important. And they are artificial intelligence, semiconductors, which of course are the things that make all of compute power possible, the chips that power all of our computers, quantum computing, which is still farther out, different aspects of biotechnology, and financial technology. And in some of those areas, the West is still ahead. I would say in artificial intelligence, most of the academics doing the really cutting edge work are in the UK, in the US, in Canada, and elsewhere. But Shirley is right. China is rapidly catching up. When you see those AI companies that are in Beijing and elsewhere, they are straight out of central casting from Silicon Valley. They're doing amazing work. So AI, I would say we're really neck and neck. In semiconductors, the US, a lot of the best chips are designed in the US, produced in Korea, Japan, Taiwan. China is putting billions in to catch up rapidly in that key area. Quantum computing, it's farther out. The US still has an edge, but there are lots of impressive scientists in China doing quantum computing. And on financial technologies, which we haven't talked about yet, of course, China is doing extremely well with Ant Financial, Alipay, what Tencent is doing. I think if the West doesn't start competing and waking up in that important area, there's going to be another 5G situation where the West wakes up and says, oh, wow, China dominates the world financial system with the digital yuan and with everything they're doing in payments, where we're really falling behind.
All right. So what you are saying, though, Anya, is that the quality is still better in America and the West, but China is quickly catching up. But you're still saying unequivocally, quality is better in the US.
I think
on the whole,
you can't parse it like that. You have to go technology by technology.
All right. Okay.
And that's what I tried to do.
All right. Okay, fine. Let's go to our next question. Rahul Bharti Vijay, a student from India, currently studying in Southampton in England. Your question.
Thank you, Zeynep. So is it fair or unfair for the people to be worried about the China's involvement in the 5G technology?
Okay, Anya, there's been a great deal, of course, about the 5G Huawei technology, with the United States insisting that its allies in Europe, the United Kingdom and elsewhere should roll back on using 5G technology from Huawei. So is it fair for people to be worried or not?
It is fair for people to be worried. Data privacy and data security are critical. And it starts with the network itself, with 5G, which is the antennas and routers and things that all of our smartphones are shortly going to be running on. But more importantly than that, also the Internet of Things. Soon your self-driving car will run on it, your electricity grid. And so I do think that there is a valid concern that European and the US government had, that if one company, whether it's Huawei or frankly, whether it's any other company, but in particular a company that's so closely tied to the Chinese government, has control of all of the pipes, if you will, of the world technology infrastructure, that there is a possibility that there could be spying, that there is a possibility that there is control over the web. And in the worst case scenario, when people say, well, at some point you're giving Huawei the opportunity to make all the self-driving cars run off the road. I can't speak at all to Huawei's motives, whether they're interested in that, whether that's actually going to happen. But I do think it is important that there are multiple companies laying 5G infrastructure and that the world has an option. This gets very technical and complicated, but there is currently a movement afoot called ORAN, which basically says that the software layer on top of this should be open source. So that makes it much harder for one company to control everything and to be potentially dangerous in terms of its control of data, and allows a far more even playing field.
All right, thank you. Shirley, so you've just written a chapter about Huawei and its 5G technology in this new book that's coming out. Should we be nervous about using it? Anya says yes. What's your answer?
I wanted to, first of all, define 5G technology a little bit. I don't want us to think 5G is this magic technology. It is just a phase of civilizational development. It's nothing more than 4G plus 1, or if we look at it, 6G minus 1. I think in a couple of years' time, the world will be very much talking about 6G and forget about the 5G altogether. But, it's a debatable question, Zainab, but I think most of the experts in the world, they agree that 5G is not that sort of technology to the likes of a steam engine in the sense that it'll singularly fire up a whole wave of industrial revolution. But certainly it is a very important transitory technology in the world's history. But 5G should definitely benefit the whole of humanity. And I think what is important is to look at Huawei as an example. It's currently operating in 172 countries globally. And bear in mind, there are only 195 sovereign nations in the world, so it's covered a lot.
Shirley, Anya says that the technology could be used for spying. What do you say to her?
Anya, well, certainly that's a concern. We have been hearing about it for the past 2 years or so, but so far no country has come up with substantive evidence to substantiate it, but it remains a concern. What I wanted to say is fundamentally the world is changing because of China's 5G technology. Whether we like it or not, the Western world, by and large, OECD economies are more concerned, but if you look at the large part of the developing world, remember over 120 plus countries in the world are still in the developing phase, and they by and large welcome Chinese technology. So how do we look at the future world? Is that going to be potentially the regions of the world that are fast developing, that has the demographic majority, and the countries that are desperate for economic growth are going to welcome Huawei's technology or Chinese technology by and large?
Okay, let's go to our third question now from Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, to Mumbi Wachira. And you're a lecturer at a business school, so we expect a very profound question from you then, Mumbi. What is it?
I hope so, Zainab. Thank you. So my question for the panelists is, even if the US decouples completely from Chinese technology, does the US have the current manufacturing capacity to build and sustain quantities required on a global scale?
All right, Anya, so what's your response to Mumbi?
Thank you, Mumbi, for that question. I really hope that the US doesn't decouple completely from China. I think that harms the US, China, and the whole rest of the world. There are a few select areas, very advanced biotechnology, maybe some parts of vaccines where you think, well, I think each country should probably have a secure supply chain. So when I talk about tech decoupling, I'm talking about those very, very narrow areas. But I think ultimately the US and China having a positive trading and economic relationship, having a partnership where we can cooperate on many things around the world, for example, electric vehicles that Shirley mentioned, and climate change is really important. So I very much hope there isn't a complete decoupling.
All right. Thanks. Shirley?
I agree with Anya. But also, I think it's important for us to identify, does the U.S. really want to deglobalize the world today? There's been a lot of criticisms about the U.S. In that fashion. I personally don't think so. I think the U.S. wants, in a way, a de-Sinicized world. The U.S. wants to remove China out of certain key components of its global value chain. But certainly the U.S. has no capacity, and it would be totally unrealistic to think about the U.S. is going to produce everything onshore. So the U.S. is going to look for other emerging markets that looks and feels just like what China used to be, and to recalibrate this global supply chain. And so the U.S. is going to move further down into the other emerging markets to recalibrate. But at the same time, I don't want to think that this is a unilateral action, because China is moving supply chains closer to home as well.
Thanks very much indeed. Mumbi, do you want to respond to what you've heard our two panelists say?
No, I'd just like to thank them. And I think they've looked at it from the point of view of the opportunities that are there, especially for the emerging markets, which is of great interest to me. I just would want, maybe going forward, given the political landscape that is there, whether indeed such collaborations will be possible moving forward.
Thank you very much indeed, Mumbi. Let's now go to Washington, D.C. in the United States, to Marianne Douglas Ungaro. Marian, what do you want to ask?
Zainab.
Hi.
What effects do the trade war have on the tech workforce and labor conditions? Also, are Silicon Valley and China competing for the best talent?
Shirley?
I think absolutely true. Last week, if we heard the news, China just announced it's going to build its first chip university. This university is going to do nothing. All the curricula is going to be centered around the IC industry. And not only that, it's going to work closely with Huawei's HiSilicon and China's SMIC chip maker to bridge this the gap between education and the commercialization. So China is basically saying, well, the U.S. can ban selling chips to China, can ban selling equipment to SMIC, but now I'm going to attract the best and the brightest, the global talents, the professors, the professionals from the industry to teach in China. So as long as China has the brain capacity, it's only a matter of time that China is going to have the products. And so this fundamental competition, economically speaking, between China and the US is going to be centered on technology, but the core of technological competition is on talents.
So what does this mean for countries vying for the best brains, Anya? Because we know that the United States does attract the brightest and the best from all over the world, including from China. I mean, Chinese students go to the United States and they form the biggest number of foreign students than any other group there.
It does, Zainab, and I think it's one of the great strengths of the United States that we do attract talent from all over the world. There is a competition for technology talent, as Shirley said, and China is doing a lot with the 1,000 Talents program, encouraging people to come to work in China in the tech industry. In the US, I would say in the last few years, with how aggressive the Trump administration has been on immigration, I think there's a danger of shooting ourselves in the foot. We're stronger if we get the best talent from all over the world. And Marianne had a second question, which is, how has the trade war affected the tech industry? And I have to say, less than you would think. So there are still, for example, artificial intelligence labs by US companies, Microsoft, Google, many others that are in China, in Israel, in Germany, in the UK, and in the United States. That hasn't changed. You know, who's really taken the brunt from the trade war are the farmers who through tariffs aren't able to sell as much to China anymore. So China is buying its soybeans from Brazil. And the stated goal of the trade war was to create a level playing field for Western companies in China. I don't see a lot of evidence that all of the tariffs have resulted in that.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's now go to Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, to Camille Kasilater. Camille, your question.
Thank you, Zainab. My question to both of the panelists is tied up to the upcoming US elections. Given the elections, do you foresee any shift in the current dynamics in the US-China tech wars? Thank you.
Shirley, you kick off on that one.
No US president would allow China to overtake the United States at the commanding heights of the global economy, not President Trump. I don't think any future US president will allow that scenario to happen during his or her term. So as long as we understand that, and as long as China continues to pursue a number of economic strategies, I think nothing fundamental will change. But this year, Chinese economy continues to grow full year. We just saw the Q3 GDP figure came in at close to 5%. So China is landing on a sort of economic normalcy there. And the US is projected to contract about 7%, I think EU about 11%. And so China will continue to ascend on relative economic terms with that of the United States from a near peer competitor status, inching closer to a peer competitor status. And so this fundamental US-China competition will be two-pronged, both economic and ideological. But I think more importantly, economic, Zainab, it's the economy, stupid. And I think using a Clinton line there. So I think unless China, as long as China continues to ascend with the US in this global economic parity scenario, I don't think anything is going to change fundamentally.
Very quickly, Shirley. So you think there's no difference between a President Biden or a President Trump for China and the US tech war? Very quickly on that one.
Let me ask you, do you think President Biden would allow during his term that China overtakes the United States to become the largest economy in the world? I don't think so.
All right. Okay. Let's see what you have to say, Anya, because it is often said that the tone, at least, might be different if there were a President Biden from a President Trump. But actually, there isn't a great deal of difference between them. I mean, Joe Biden said of President Xi of China just in October this month, this is a guy who is a thug. So is there going to be much difference?
absolutely, Zainab. I think you'll see differences in three areas. One, the tone, exactly as you said. If Biden wins, the tone is going to be ratcheted down significantly. Two, as opposed to this Trump administration idea that we're going to go it alone, make America great again, make China great again. We're going to do things with allies. You already have heard from the Biden campaign that they want to reinvigorate NATO. They want to do a lot more with our Asian allies, where the Trump administration has tried to charge Japan 5 times more for our basing rights, and same with South Korea. So I think you'll see a big difference in that. You may see a renegotiation of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a big trade agreement that was started under the Bush administration, completed under Obama, and then scrapped under this current administration. So tone will be different. How much we work with friends around the world will be different. And I think what I said in the very beginning, there will be an effort to find some areas to collaborate, especially on climate change. And finally, on the tech war, I think Shirley is right. No US president wants to see the United States fall behind. But I think under a Biden administration, you'd see a lot more push to lift ourselves up, make ourselves competitive, rather than building a moat around American technology and trying to keep China out and tear China down.
All right. Okay, Camille.
No, thank you, both of you. Indeed, I think it's both political and economical issues. So I think it spans much more than the tech, actually. It concerns talents, it concerns economy. So I would think that the new president-elect would definitely change at least some of the dynamics currently going on.
Let's now go to our final question, and it's from Rohan Williams-Fisher from the Isle of Wight here in the UK. Rohan.
Thank you. I just want to say, at the moment, I believe China's in the lead when it comes to the race to everything else, because of how advanced they are with all their equipment, with exception to Elon Musk's and Tesla and everything. But my question is, what do you think it would take for us to move past this tech nationalism? And how long do you believe it would take for all the countries in the world to start working together, manufacturing everything?
Oh, well, that's a nice conciliatory note to end our questions on. Let me come to you first on that one, Shirley.
I want to say, if you look at in June in India, India has banned 68 Chinese apps from operating in the country. And we all know that Chinese Xiaomi, that's the smartphone maker, Alibaba, Tencent, they all have significant investments in India. So if we look at this tech nationalism scenario, it's not just confined to China and the US. I should say, perhaps not to our liking, more countries are joining the race in tech nationalism. But how do countries become competitive in global manufacturing? That is deeply rooted in the country's economic structure. That's just a fact. But I want to stress the point that tech competition, and even in today's world, this national competition is actually not a bad thing altogether. If you remember the Cold War of the 20th century, during that time, man landed on the moon, and during the Reagan administration, we ushered in this whole entire internet era. We haven't landed on a man on the moon ever since then, because there is no longer a pressure for competition. So this competition is actually, in a way, it's always a good thing for the world, because if you have two of the world's largest economies using a whole of government approach to try to invest in technology, to try to get ahead and become competitive, the rest of the world at the end of the day is going to benefit as a whole.
All right. And Anya Manuel, your final answer, please.
Wonderful. This is a great optimistic note to end on. And I would just say technology has been really unusual in the last 25 years for being so open and so international. The idea that until very recently, you had one unified world internet that the whole world could use, that you have tech talent and people flowing across areas, it is just not possible to put that genie back in the bottle. And I don't think it would be good to do so. So I think the questioner is exactly right. On most things, the tech nationalism is really limited. And I would hope that both China and the United States can tell themselves, well, we're going to have very few areas that are of national security significance. And I've mentioned them now a couple of times. semiconductors, some pieces of AI, some pieces of biotechnology, but they're narrow. And then on every other area, which is almost everything, we can continue to collaborate and the world can continue to collaborate. So I commend the questioner for that.
Thank you. Let me just ask my questioners here. I'm going to ask you, put your thumbs up if you think that the United States is winning the tech war. Who thinks the US is in the lead? Put your thumbs up. Just one of you, Camille. And who thinks that China is winning the US-China tech war?
Can I abstain?
Okay, you've abstained, Marion. A clear majority there believe that China is winning the tech war. So there you have it. That's all from this edition of Global Questions. Who's winning the US-China tech wars? Clearly, a majority think that China is out there. Remember, we're the programme that brings you the trend lines behind the headlines. Thank you very much indeed to Shirley, you and Anya Manuel, and to my questioners. And of course, to you, wherever you're watching or listening to this programme. Remember, you too can be part of Global Questions. Just submit a question to our panel for the next time and email globalquestions@bbc.co.uk. Till the next time, from me, Zainab Badawi, and the rest of the Global Questions team, goodbye.